So back in around 1982, 83 or so, there was a show on TV that I really liked, and it was called Voyagers. I don't know if any of you all remember that, but this show was about a man and a kid who traveled through time, and it was pretty much a family show. So the purpose is they would talk about the historical things that happened and try to fix history, and you would get a little lesson in the end. And I think there was even a little plug for the library in the end of the show, because it was kind of a after-school special, but it was a primetime show that kids loved and I loved. Well, they had an episode about the sinking of the Titanic. And as a child, I went to my great-grandmother, who was born in 1897, and asked her about the Titanic. And she told me the story. She was living in Keller, Texas at the time. And when she heard about the Titanic, she was a teenager. She was 15. And she told me that, yeah, I remember when that ship sank and all of those rich people died. And some of them got off. But then a whole bunch of poor people died too. And it was one of the biggest news stories to hit in even a place like Keller, Texas, that had very little electricity or very little in the way of cars or telephones. Ever since that time, I've been fascinated by the Titanic. And I have here the New York Tribune, April 16th, 1912, 14 pages. Price 1 cent. And the headline says, more than 1,500 perish as the great Titanic sinks. Only 675 survivors, mostly women and children, known to be rescued. I believe the figure climbed up a little bit, but not enough. Crowd besieges White Star office. Line officials only able to tell inquirers that but 675 of 2,200 were saved. Vincent Astor seeks news. He would be the son or brother of John Jacob Astor. On early bulletins, two of Strauss family started for Halifax to meet Mr. and Mrs. Isidore Strauss, one of the famous wealthy people on the ship. Lines equipped for safety. Who were they? Watertight compartments, submarine bells, and wireless of great value. Look at this little advertisement down here. Mallard's vanilla chocolate has a delicious flavor, distinctly its own, discriminating housewives prefer, and it just says advertisement. So, crazy place to tuck an ad in when you're reading about this story. But here's another one for Dewey's Superior Port Wine. Interesting how they would do that. No news by wireless. New England operators failed to get tidings from Titanic. Titanic 2 miles deep. This depth of ocean where the liner went down. Interestingly, when the Titanic was found, it was because it was actually found on a secret mission. It wasn't. That was not the goal of the mission. That it accidentally found the Titanic. So that's a little bit of trivia. And then obviously this paper is going to cover a lot of the Titanic, but also what was happening on April 16th, 1912. Floods sweep Louisiana. 50,000 homeless, and Taft urges federal aid. Taft is the president. 50,000 homeless. No news of Allen liners. Their reported rescue of passengers not confirmed. Montreal. The two Allen Line steamships, Virginian and Parisian, which were reported as having steamed toward the scene of the Titanic disaster, had not reported to the company's headquarters here up to 10 o'clock tonight any definite news of what they had done. The report that the Virginia had sent a wireless, and so they're worried that maybe possibly 2 more ships sunk, but I don't believe that occurred. Coal conference today. Miners Committee hopeful of bringing about a settlement. So let's talk about that for a second. There was a coal strike going on when the Titanic set sail. So the Titanic was a steamer, ran on coal. And interestingly, the Titanic set sail and was fully coaled while other ships were suffering from a coal strike and doubling up or canceling trips and so forth. So that's another one of the things that has led into some interesting conspiracy theories about the Titanic that I might mention at the end of this video. Threat from Roosevelt meant New York City delegates will have to fight for title. Taft inquires about Butts. One of the many messages received of the White Star Line offices was that of President Taft, who asked for information regarding his aide, Major Butts. The president's message read, did Major Butts live or die? I can't remember. Miners to resume soon. Roosevelt victory, it is said, hastens end of suspension. New Yorker dies in bus. C.C. Whiting on way from Atlantic City succumbs to apoplexy. Save Our Souls was Titanic's last appeal. Wireless operators so interpreted the SOS signal. Save Our Souls, SOS. It supplanted the CQD. So SOS was still relatively new, called Morse code message. So CQD was the original one. I don't believe it stands for Save Our Souls. Operator of experience. John George Phillips, trusted employee of Marconi Company, had best apparatus at command. 19 hurt in a train wreck in Colorado. Calls for searchlights. Lord Montague would have all ocean liners use them. Searchlights. Crowds throng bulletins. The Army Reserve was called to clear Broadway, stunned by the news of the Titanic. If that gives you an idea, even my grandmother, all the way in Keller, Texas, knew about it. Republican Club says it has remained true to promise. New destroyer launched. Asinine girl favorite in infancy of Admiral names the Duet. Wireless from Olympics captain gives news, and weeping women gather at White Star offices to learn fate of relatives. 1323 passengers on ship and crew of 890. Vessel disappears at 2:20 a.m. No word from Virginia or Parisian, which Vice President Franklin hopes saved others. Disaster greatest in history. If hope is unfounded, Captain believed to have gone down with his post of duty, which is true. He did go down with the ship. On the next page, we have a cross-section of the Titanic. Consider that this is 1912, okay? Think about the work it took to procure this image for the paper within 1 day of the sinking. So this is not like they had Google to go to. Somehow they had to get this, whether it was from the White Star office in New York, or they got an artist to quickly draw something, or it's no telling. It does look like it was an existing picture that they somehow put in here. Longitudinal section of the Titanic showing the disposition of compartments and watertight bulkheads. Now, it's also possible that this illustration had existed in marketing materials that was widespread at this time too, and that I just don't know. But it shows the watertight compartments. So this whole page, with the exception of some ads tucked over in the corners, like for Hunyadi, Janus Water, Natural Laxative, The Hard Man, a rattling story of military life and adventure and mystery. The scene is Africa by Campbell McCulloch, next Sunday magazine, the New York Tribune. And this is all Titanic news. And then on sea and land, at home and abroad, night and day, accidents are happening. Sometimes there are narrow escapes from injury or death, which are but emphasize the necessity of accident insurance. Oh my gosh, could you be any more tacky? That is tacky. Okay, yesterday the Titanic sank, and yeah, we're gonna stick this right here on the second page. Okay, down on the Hudson, before a panorama of moving pictures shown by the great searchlights on the magnificent steamers of the People's Line, of the Citizens Line, all sail, no rail, a dining service at reasonable prices equal to that of the best New York hotels, comfortable smoking rooms, spacious ladies' parlors, and cozy staterooms. Are you kidding me? Hudson Navigation Company. And let's see how they worked in the little bit about searchlights, and you gotta wonder what was the decorum in 1912. Okay, here's some more images of the Titanic. Great Atlantic liners that have rusted age of the Titanic. I apologize. That's the Virginian. It's got one smokestack. The Titanic had 4. 3 functioning, 1 for show. That's the Carpathia, which actually ended up rescuing the people on the Titanic, the Baltic. There's a picture of Captain Smith, the captain of the Titanic, and he did go down with the ship. Many people of note on the lost steamer. Yeah, I think we're all aware of that, but among the people who were on it were John Jacob Astor, Guggenheim, Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Strauss, oh my gosh, yeah, the one of the president's aides. But you know, what about all of the other people? Some of whom are never even identified. Some of whom, the steerage class people. All of those people had value. So, Hunter, Altamore Rye, first over the bars, best over the bars. This is rye whiskey. The prohibition wouldn't be for another 7 years, so we were drinking freely here. Here we have the New York Telephone Company. This is 1912, so telephones are pretty doggone new. Telephone Directory goes to press May 9th. The summer edition of the New York Telephone Directory goes to press Thursday, May 9th, 1912. Telephone services must be arranged for on or before that date in order to have directory listings appear in this issue. Call, write, or telephone to nearest commercial office. Here's a Revillion Furnace. Store furs now. First place in our cold rooms now or at your way, safe from moth and accident. Buy yourself a fur coat. Experts here sure big liner was unsinkable. It wasn't. Great insurance loss. Titanic worth 10 million, cargo tops 1 million, local companies suffer. Now if this article is true, then that should be all of the evidence needed to dispel one of the most popular conspiracy theories about the Titanic that we'll get into. Special sale of Gorman plated ware. The Gorham Company, 5th Avenue and 36th Street, has placed on sale at greatly reduced prices certain articles and discontinued designs of Gorman plated ware, particularly desirable for use in and out of townhomes. Titanic carried 318 in first cabin, many notable included. Here's another list of passengers. Besides 261 in second cabin, Titanic had 743rd class, and here's a list of names here. If you're interested in these names, what I'll do real quick is slowly pan, and if you'd like to pause, I'm going to pull out so you can read the names, and you can pause if you want to. It might be interesting to compare this to something more up to date to see if there's any changes. Has iceberg detector. We're talking about science here. Scientist says microthermometer would have warned Titanic. Here's an article about Colorado is a wonderful place for children. Plenty of hits and runs. White Sox get more of each, and Detroit Tigers lose. Indoors tough in Chicago. Harvard wins easily. Split in 7th Missouri. So look how they're cramming the sports news all under this Titanic. So we have an article here about Captain Smith's career. Titanic star ominous, and there's some pictures of the inside of the Titanic. Sumptuous interior arrangements on the Titanic. The cafe restaurant on the sun deck. Lavishly decorated and furnished, intended to be the after dinner social center. Icebergs, heavy tolls. A new Francis Bacon piano for the oldest Dubois and Raven, or Bacon and Raven piano. So this paper is very scattershot. It's all over the place. There's a huge news story. So they're squeezing ads, they're squeezing sports scores. Mark Hanna, the long-expected biography. Marcus Alonzo Hanna by Herbert Crowley, author of The Promise of American Life. Titanic Wonder of Age. London hears late of loss of Titanic. China takes kindly to new order of things. No public unrest marks work of reorganization begun by Republic. Herculean task for UN. One result of revolution may be the elevation of the chief legations to rank of embassies. And they're talking about China here. Quite a long article about China. about the Manchus rivals depicting a 5-colored flag, Trans-Siberian travel. Get that order now, Mr. Businessman. You can think right now of hundreds of instances where you would have saved the expense of a trip, captured a doubtful order, flashed an important inquiry, and brought back the information on the jump. The Western Union Telegraph ad. Okay. Ozone to destroy flies. Ozone is to take a prominent part in the campaign against the deadly housefly. All disagreeable odors, such as attract flies, are caused by tiny particles of decaying organic or vegetable matter floating in the air. Ozone attacks and burns up these particles, removing the odor and destroying the food which would nourish flies. Interesting reference to ozone in 1912. We hear about it all the time, but Army and Navy orders, and this is talking about movements of ships and troops and so forth. It's just kind of interesting. You don't see that in papers anymore. And here's local news. The 7th Regiment Army in Chicago were Mexican provocations, the tragedy of the Titanic again, unshaken, President Taft, congratulations to China, the course of journalism, the immunity law, courtesy, bill to protect women, the talk of the day. So this is just very similar to the Colliers from 1912. We just have a smattering of different stories, one after another. I'm gonna drink some coffee. Interesting. Nathan Strauss in Rome. Interesting. A member of the Strauss family on a completely unrelated news story about how he's in Rome fighting against tuberculosis. Art exhibitions, the Buchanan collection, Mr. Hopkinson Smith's drawing, Drop and Hold book sale, third part of famous library tracks, Fewer Bidders, all the varieties, Everett Shin's burlesque given first view at 5th Avenue, Hammerstein Anniversary, Dear Old Charlie, Charles Hawtrey and Brookfield's adaptation of French farce like playable acted. Here's a political cartoon showing Teddy Roosevelt. Vote as you shout, boys. TR. I believe this is the time he was on the Bull Moose ticket. Here we go. Clara Barton laid to rest. Red Cross founder had just died. Very famous woman. Major McNamara dead. On the obituaries, they are not listing Titanic passengers yet. League and college baseball. So here's some more sports. There's Fred Merkle, a good picture. New York Giants. Barrel sees great year for International League. Reds win in 11th. Champions beat Boston. Quakers beat Dartmouth. News for the golfers. Truck market is active. Earn a false alarm. Outboxed by knockout Brown in 10 lively rounds. About a disappointment. Timely bits of sport. Fred Merkle, first baseman of Giants, not a holdout, joins team in Boston. Old Crow Rye. The standard of rye whiskey, guaranteed pure rye whiskey under National Pure Food Law serial number 2163, not blended, not adulterated. Sold only in sealed bottles everywhere, never sold in bulk. Here's a picture of Marjorie Hamilton, crowned with praise by the tens of thousands of those she restored to happiness and health by her drugless treatment for making fat vanish. So they were loses fat, wins fortune. The amazing story of how Marjorie Hamilton, compelled to reduce her weight or lose her employment, found a drugless treatment for making fat vanish. Actresses and society women rejoice over their new slender figures. She has built not on the tears of disappointed patrons, but on the smiles and joy of those who came to her not in vain. Most discussed businesswoman in America tells secrets of her success. So, it's 1912, 107 years ago, and they were still talking about this, proclaiming that they had solved this. There's really Broadway actress conquers wrinkles too. My goodness, they were fixing everything in 1912, weren't they? Up here is the day in Washington. Marriage leads to suicide. Purity candidate wedded. Octoroon opponents show. I apologize for that headline. That's an offensive word nowadays. But this is 1912. Mayor, his own boss, tells Lutheran ministers no political leaders sway him. Truth about excise law. Will of community explains impossibility of better enforcement. Apply gag rule in house. Says wife is kept from him. H.C. Pierce must pay. Justice Erlanger declines to open default for $177,000. More ads. Here we get many more ads in this section here. Railroad earnings, marriage records, silence in Mexico City, freighter Ramsey, Utah, ridicule for home rule, domestic situations wanted, if you read these ads, you will see that people's race and nationality figured in prominently in these ads. This was a different time period. And for example, also you have people saying they're Swedish or other nationalities. Here is the Marlboro Blenheim Hotel, Atlantic City, leading resort house of the world. 400 private baths, each with hot and cold sea and fresh water. 2 blocks of oceanfront, white service in both American plan and a la carte dining room, exquisite music. Particularly attractive in April, May, and June. Hotel Dennis, Atlantic City, Hotel Morton, St. Charles. So they're trying to get people to go to Atlantic City. If you watch Boardwalk Empire, this is around at the same time, within 7 years of the same time period. Cunard is the competing cruise ship line to the White Star Line, which owned the Titanic. No mention, no. Another thing that's interesting is if this was a few years later, you would have seen Cunard, sends prayers to the Titanic, or Cunard, but there's not any mention of it at all. They're not even acknowledging it. I have to take note of the fact that in 1912 there is this sort of lack of the politeness that we came to see. Consider 1963, after the assassination of Kennedy, when we saw so many tributes and memorials in the paper, and I have not seen one in this paper. I've seen a lot of articles, a lot of news stories, but I have not seen any businesses printing an ad, with condolences or anything. So this is interesting. Marconi Here's the stock report. American tobacco, American sugar. Look at the commodities and look how kind of simple all the companies were and how few there were. I mean, seriously, there's compared to nowadays. I mean, Canadian Pacific, Bethlehem Steel, Atchison, Baltimore and Ohio. I mean, we have like rail lines and cruise lines and commodities, and you don't see all of the companies. It's very interesting. I take it back. As you can see, they just have it split up in a different way. Here's the New York Stock Exchange, bond market sales, inactive stocks, miscellaneous stocks, and there you do see some businesses. Railroad equipment bonds, car trusts, guaranteed stocks. Interesting. Portland City and Oregon Railway Company. Report on steel labor, stocks in other cities. Some good fiction and some straight facts. Arthur Conan Doyle, Campbell McCulloch, Silford, James Hay Jr. Of course, everyone is now reading Conan Doyle's great serial, The Lost World, so there's no need to say more of that. But here's some other books. They're that are, they're trying to push out. And now let's go to the last page. Court issues writ for test of Thaw's sanity. Okay, let's talk about that real quick. This case, if this is what I'm thinking of, it was not the same thought. On the application of Clarence J. Sheeran, counsel for Mrs. Mary C. Thaw, Justice Stapleton in the Supreme Court, Brooklyn, issued yesterday a writ of habeas corpus directing Dr. John Russell, medical superintendent of Matawan State Hospital, to produce before Herrick. Yeah, this is the Stanford White case. What they're talking about here is a case where Harry K. Thaw was a very rich man in New York. This was during that, ragtime era, and he was married to a woman named what was it, Eleanor Nesbitt or something like that. She was a very, very pretty woman, and she had previously dated a guy named Stanford White, who was an architect, famous architect there. Well, Harry Thaw was so jealous, he just couldn't handle it. Evelyn Nesbitt, that was her name. He shot Stanford White, and he claimed insanity. They got Evelyn Nesbitt to testify in his favor, but eventually I think he was put in an insane asylum, and Evelyn Nesbitt sort of disappeared into obscurity. It was a very sensational murder that occurred in the early 20th century, and they were still talking about it. If you want to watch a movie about it, it's called Ragtime, and it's a pretty good movie. I think it's directed by Milos Forman, maybe. So if you want more on that story. And so that was the crime of the century this time. Aviator and Brad DeBee depart in shower of rice and old shoes. Here's the weather map. Amusements: Hippodrome, Circus, Tetrazzini. Next Sunday evening, farewell to Tetrazzini. Miss Charles Hartway, Battlefields, John Mason, The Greyhound. Okay, what you're looking at is circuses and vaudeville. What you don't see here really are very many movies. Movies existed, but it was plays, and vaudeville were still the main form of entertainment. And this is very, very interesting, because these are ads for Eddie Foy, Henry Miller, The Rainbow, Ziegfeld, Moulin Rouge, Ziegfeld, The Girls. Yeah, that's, wow, The Quaker Girl, The Talker. I mean, this is, it's somewhere in this listing, Jack Benny and George Burns and all of them are performing in these shows. Very interesting. There's the cat. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got something out of it. I'm just going to do one more flip through. This was a good paper. this was a little piece of history. And if you're interested in the Titanic or the Jazz Age, well, not this is the Ragtime Age. This is not the Jazz Age. Jazz Age was the 20s. This is the Ragtime era. Then this is a time capsule. If you these are things that make me happy. Sitting back and reading these stories and articles, reading the old way people wrote and talked. Very cool stuff. So, like I said, I'll see you every night at 8 o'clock. If you like my channel, please do me a favor and subscribe. Oh, wait. I was going to tell you some conspiracy theories. Okay. Do you want to hear them? Okay. Let me get some coffee. Okay, so the most widespread conspiracy theory right now is that the Titanic was not really sunk. That was in fact the Olympic. And what had happened is a couple years earlier, the Olympic, under the command of the same captain, Smith, collided with another ship in New York Harbor and damaged it to the point where it was an insurance loss. So the theory goes is that the owner of the White Star Line switched the ships in the graving docks and then launched the slightly repaired Olympic as the Titanic. Evidence of that being that if you look at the letters on the Titanic's nameplate on the bow of this ship, it's raised letters, whereas the Olympic was engraved. Then they talk about other differences and so forth, and the reason is that the Olympic would sink, they would get the insurance settlement, and then the Titanic would be called the Olympic. That's the story. And that the Californian, I believe, was sent out to rescue the survivors, but was loaded down with nothing but winter blankets and coats. That was their cargo, which is true. That was their cargo. So it's interesting. Do I believe it? No, but it's still nonetheless an interesting theory. But if you want to find out more about that conspiracy theory, there's plenty of places you can Google it. So anyway, I'll see you tomorrow night. Like I said, please give me a thumbs up, a nice comment, and subscribe. I like your feedback. The comments make me really happy and give me a lot of encouragement. I can't tell you how much I appreciate them, and some of you have said some really nice things to me, and it means a lot to me. And I think that is the driving force that gets me to do these videos every night. And no matter how tired I am after work or what, I still am so glad that these videos are something that you like, that you watch, that you appreciate, and that you tell me about it. That means more to me than anything. So thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.